Welcome to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practice of Top Performers. I'm Dr. Relly Nadler, Dr. Cathy Greenberg, and I have now been doing this for 18 years. And we have been named #1 in leadership development by FeedSpot when they evaluate these blogs. And Cathy and I always are trying to bring tips and tools that'll help you or your team perform in the top 10%. You know, that top 10% is a tipping point, meaning you want to get people in the top 10%. They are more productive. It helps with retention, engagement. So hopefully today we're going to be talking about coaching strategies for turbulent times. And we also want to share some of these tools for moment mastery. And if you want some more information from Cathy, drcathygreenberg.com, Cathy at drcathygreenberg.com. For me, Relly at drrellynadler.com or rnadler at truenorthleadership.com. So Cathy, welcome.
Hi, Relly. I have some good news for you. If you haven't
Okay.
seen LinkedIn today, we actually are once again listed #1 in the top 10 influencers for leadership podcasts. And I was very happy to see that first thing on a Monday morning. So congratulations to our audience, to
Yes.
all our guests for being so amazing and wonderful. And, despite these turbulent times, Relly, and I think we're going to talk a lot about some of the mindset elements that you've been playing with for some time now that you're going to emphasize in today's show. And I'm really excited to hear about them. But let me just kind of give a little bit of data to the audience to put things in context. So first of all, we know that, and you say it so beautifully on every podcast episode, that we are in a tsunami of emotions.
Yeah.
We are in information overload, uncertainty, overwhelm. Everybody wants more, more, more. And we moved from this VUCA, this volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous environment, into a BANI environment, brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and inconceivable. And as a result, stress in America, these studies actually tell us that 47% of people are experiencing anxiety, 44% sadness, and 39% are downright angry, to be honest with you. And then Gallup found that 40% experienced worry, 37% stress, 30% physical pain, 26% sadness, and 22% anger, not only in their daily routine, but in their previous day's routine. And it builds, right? So it's building over time. And about 75% of us feel like we could use more emotional support. Obviously, all these things are impacting our ability to use our IQ points effectively. And we have impaired decision making, our chronic or excessive fear and anxiety disrupts our rational thinking. We are dealing with people who are reacting impulsively or irrationally. I mean, I walk around saying all the time that civility is dead. I race off to Italy every fall in the hopes that I'll find it. But, the brain is under sustained fear and relies more and more on the emotional center than on our rational processing. We're going to dive into some of these things in today's show and hopefully give our audience an opportunity to learn a little bit more about how they're likely to perceive situations more negatively and give them some tips and tools, especially from your toolkit, Relly, on how they can help themselves push away from this excessive fear and anger and irrational thinking.
It's so true. And I'm sure, Kath, every day you're doing this with folks, and so am I. And excuse me, often I'd say we're operating with less IQ points. And I'm sure you've heard me say this before. I've given IQ tests, and I think people, Many of the leaders we're working with are probably 115 to 120 or above. CEOs supposedly have IQ of, 125 or so. Well, I think because of everything that you're saying, all the stress, the tsunami of emotions, we're probably all hovering around average. And the other thing that I like to say, we're all on autopilot. And if you stay on autopilot, you stay average. Nobody I work with or Cat that you work with wants to be average. So that's why I think the things we're doing on the show, and I'm glad to hear that the podcasts will continue to have influence with others. So what are the few things they can do to not be average and hopefully to be excellent? I did share in LinkedIn just that the micro initiatives. What are the few things they can do to have a macro impact? But I'm excited today to talk about, I think, what is a commonality. I want to get your input on this. Really with coaching, and I would say therapy, or this may happen with a good friend. And so this whole idea, if these thoughts are in your head, they're not out, they're internal, it can feel like a fiend. And I'm going to use that as an acronym and kind of talk about that. And what's a fiend? Well, fiend is a source of an agent of evil, harm, distress, or ruin. So if our thoughts are only in our head, the default mode network is where our mind just wanders. It could wander into stress, anxiety, worry, or it could wander into imagination. So being aware of that is important when this default mode happens. If it's only in the head, I would say it goes into more worry and anxiety. And we want to get it out into the light. And I'll give you this acronym from fiend to glitter. And I think coaching, a good conversation with a friend, therapy gets thoughts out on the table. And we know about an examination table when your body's there and the doctor's uh, hitting your knee and see if you got the reflex. Well, we want to put thoughts on the examination table, and that happens in the light. So let me just kind of share this, and I'd love to get your comment because I do think it's a common factor of why therapy, coaching, a good friend. Oh, thanks for listening. Oh, wow. We release oxytocin. It's invisible, but these thoughts of them invisible. I'm putting the light on. So what's a fiend? FIEND. If the thoughts are only in the head, it can feel like distress, harm, ruin. That's what a fiend is. Well, F is for fear. Kat, you already talked about that, enhances anxiety. The acronym I'm sure you used of fear. FEAR, false expectations appearing real. Or FEAR, failure to examine assumed reality. So if it's in the head, the F is fear. The I is irrational. It's in our head, and we think because I thought it, therefore it must be right. Wrong. It's distorted reality. There's no real evidence. The E is exaggerated. Worst case scenario. We go there automatically. It's negative. You talked about that with Manny, all about what could go wrong. That's where our brain goes. And it just takes off on its own. And it's dark. There's no light with that. And some of the key phrases, it's all around self-talk. If you hear yourself, what if this happens? Oh, I can't handle this. Oh, I won't be able to. You fill in the blank. So we'll get to the glitter, but so that's the fiend. I want to get
Yeah.
your comment on that before we
Yeah, I
get.
know. I'm sitting here and I'm kind of waiting for the next word to come out of your mouth because one of the things that we know, Relly, and I've been really delving into this with some of the folks that I have been working with on the subject of fear and elasticity of identity and elasticity of our emotions and in teaching the emotional factors section of our MAP program, which is the new program we rolled out at the National Command and Staff College. And to your point, the fiend is eating up our energy. And so we think that when we have no energy,
Yeah.
that we're in a state of depression. And let's be real clear with our audience. We're professional coaches, even though you are a licensed psychologist. And we try not to dip our toes too far into the therapy pool. But let me give everybody a heads up. The fiend is eating the energy that you need for rational thinking,
Right.
for reality checking,
Yep.
problem solving, for relationship development, for your interpersonal skills, for your empathy. So this fiend is destroying your conscious thought. And the reason we're feeling exhausted, or as most people refer to this feeling of depression, this withdrawal from social gatherings, this need to sleep more, this need to feel isolated, it's because remember, your brain doesn't like to do too much activity. It's already overwhelmed with just
Right.
keeping your body functioning, right? One foot in front of the other, one arm working to support the other in balance, your eyes, your ears, your nose smelling things. We are in constant motion these days, as you say lovingly, more, more, more. But the reality is the fiend is taking up what
Yeah.
little energy the brain is allowing us. And so you're so right when you say it's fear, it's irrational, it's exaggerated, it's negative, and it's dark. And that would cause anybody
Yeah.
to want to sequester and stay away from others. But in fact, as you said so beautifully, it's those connections in conversations
Yeah.
with those that we have compassionate conversation with, that feed us and help us rebalance and provide us with an opportunity to rebalance that loss of energy.
That's so true. I love the term cognitive budget. It's kind of what you were saying.
Yeah.
We only got so much energy. We only have so much of this budget. And in a sense, and you're saying it's getting wasted on what's spinning in our head. And then we've all experienced it. So I'm going to get to now that we put the light on these thoughts, the examination table, and we really look at it. And so some of the key phrases that sometimes coaches can use could be, so what would help here? What can I learn? What do I need to do differently? And when we put these on the examination table and we look at it, first, it activates the prefrontal cortex, as you know. And so we actually can have some rationale and go, huh, I'm not sure why I thought that. Well, we didn't, when it was in their head, it was dark. We didn't have that light on it. And so not only does it activate when we get the thoughts on the table, the prefrontal cortex, this salience network, which is very important between the prefrontal cortex, thinking, doing, and then the default mode network, typically a little bit more worry, but it could be imagination. And this also happens in coaching and probably in therapy. It looks at what's the value, what's most important here for you. And when we activate that salience network, it can help. So this idea of glitter, and at the coaching college of executive coaching, um, I got some help when I presented this. First, it was LITER, and I wanted the two T's, and I'll tell you what the two T's are. Um, but I couldn't have two T's because it would be litter without the G. And so, and so there was a person who was on the getting trained. She's like, "Oh, I know." She took a break. She came back. She was an entrepreneur. She says, "You should add a G." I was like, "Oh yeah." So what's glitter? Well, first, it's on the table, so now we can see it's got light, the glitter. And so the G is goal focused. We know from coaching that installation of hope, it's the positive emotional attractor. What are you leaning into? It's goal focused. That's the G. The light is, as we're saying, but if we use some Jungian terms, he talks about the shadow. Well, that was all the fiend. And now as we shed light on it, it's like, oh, maybe I can accept it more. It's not so gruesome. In the dark shadows, it seemed gruesome. And so that's the L. And then you have the I, which is insightful. And so what we do in coaching, but also I'd say this happens in therapy, but a conversation with a good friend, your self-awareness it gets enhanced. We see these patterns. We see this impacts. Oh, I didn't realize that was an impact on me or impact on them. So that's the I. And then there's two T's, transactional. So what's the changes? What are you going to do next? How are we going to measure that? And so in coaching for sure, and I think it also happens in therapy, just the idea of having something moving forward. Some of these transactions can be transformational. Not all of them, obviously, but some of these insights, you change your mindset, and you change it once, it can be changed. And so I think in coaching, also probably in therapy and with a good friend, someone says, oh, wow, that is transformational. Not all the time. And then the E in the glitter is empowering, enhance autonomy. We know the sense of mastery. I have choices. It also helps with confidence. And then the R is realistic or rational. Is there evidence to support what the fiend was saying? And so I know the last part of this, I think you probably heard me say this before. As a psychologist, I would be with people in private practice before I started doing executive coaching and just normalizing things. And I think a good friend does that, therapy. Oh, you're not alone in that. Most people would feel that, and they would be a sigh of relief. Oh, wow, it's normal. And I remember also thinking, did I really need to get a doctorate and pay all this money to have this normalizing statement, which is part of the glitter? We get that normalizing from our friends and we get that connection, and that's that oxytocin that we get. So you got the fiend, put it on the examination table, shed light on it, and then the glitter.
Well, I love that, Relly. And I'll tell you, there's something else in there that I think makes a lot of sense for those of us who are in coaching, because if we look at the core competencies, and the most important one, of course, is active listening, there's the blinking words, right? So some of that glitter comes from the blinking words that we hear that give us insight as coaches to what's going on for this person, that we can help them normalize and help them in their executive functioning to evaluate the accuracy of those thoughts and to put a little bit of a light, if you will, or that glitter, if you will, on that default mode network. Wake them up to recognizing that there is more that is going on that
Yeah.
can be thought of as a possibility for the transformation that might not happen every time, but at least creates an empowering, as you said, hope and confidence, and assuming that they are whole, healthy people who can find their own answers with just a little bit of help and a little bit of assistance, looking at that beautiful glitter, and recognizing that they don't have to litter that negative stuff all over the place, right?
That's right. Well, you and I love our metaphors and talking visual. So I think if it stays in the head and the fiend, one of the metaphors I like, and they said that negativity, we all have that negativity for the right reason, that negativity bias, it's self-protection. What is wrong? What could be wrong? What will be wrong? Oh, I better prepare. I better prepare.
Mhm.
So the metaphor, it's like these negative fiend thoughts. It's like a deep sea fishing, and I know you're out on the coast in Florida. It's like deep sea fishing, and you get a fish on the line, and it just takes off. Well, that's the fiend. Before we know it, it's way out there. A good conversation with a coach, a therapist, a friend starts reeling in the fiend and starts making it, kind of bringing it in and say, well, is that really true? And even hearing yourself talk is going to bring some of that insight.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to take a quick break, really. And when we come back, let's talk a little bit about how leaders look when they're stressed and how we might be able to help them define some habits to become higher performers when they're not at their best. Don't go away. You're listening to Leadership Development News.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News, Profiles and Practices of Top Performers. So we're Cathy and I typically we have great guests, but we thought this would be really fun and engaging for you, the audience, and actually certainly for Cathy and I, to talk about some of the things that we're doing and that we're excited about. And so one of the things we first want to talk about, just from our experiences, what are the challenges that leaders go through? Well, a couple of them, I'll share some, and then Cathy will share some. It is this idea, we're talking a lot about thinking, getting your thinking on the table, the examination, shed the light on it. Well, guess what? We don't like to think. Cathy alluded to that. And we think about fast and slow thinking. We know from Kahneman, his book, Fast and Slow Thinking. What'd he say about slow thinking? One, we don't like to do it. We are cognitively lazy. We talked about the cognitive budget, and it takes a lot of cognitive budget. I think it's worse now. How often do we want to go to Google um, or to Chat GPT? Let them do the thinking. And so this idea is that we don't like to think long or hard. And Kahneman said, slow thinking, maybe 2% of the time. Well, that's going to happen when you're in front of a coach. They're compelling you. It's the forced focus to think slow. And I love just about what you think about. William James, one of the father of psychology, said, your focus is your experience. Because you're on autopilot, you see a coach, also a therapist, and maybe even a good friend, you're forced to focus on these things and therefore have some glitter. What we think, we become. The Buddha said way back when. So are you off autopilot? A lot of coaching is intentional. instead of the default mode network that just takes off. And then around influence, more current, Robert Cialdini. What's more accessible in the mind is more probable in action. So when your coach says, so what's your goal? And what's so important about that? It's accessible, it's in your mind, so you've got a better chance of that happening. The other piece of this, Cathy said this, there's so much going on, we don't take the time to think. And we're always on autopilot. And so whether it's the individual or the team, truly having the time to think. And then the last part of this, and then Cathy will give you some of them. Tara Urich, who wrote the book on insight, and a organizational psychologist, very, very research oriented, talked about self-awareness or lack of self-awareness. You ask someone, are you aware? And about 95% of us say, oh, yeah, yeah, of course I'm aware. And she, in her research, said it's only about 10 to 15% of us. Why coaching is so important? Because it's raising your awareness. And so it's an awareness. What does that mean about your values, passion, goals, personality, strengths, weaknesses, your impact on others? Those are all the conversation that we have in coaching.
You know, you are so spot on, Relly, as you always are. And it makes me reflect. You know, I'm thinking about some of the shows that we've had at this halfway mark in the year. And some of the data that pops up for me, and I don't know if you'll recall, one of our guests said that less than 13% of leaders actually achieve their strategy.
Wow.
And that's such a small number. And many people are living in a constant state of wanting to get a result, but looking in the rear view mirror with a lot of regret. And as a result, that imposter syndrome
Mm.
will kind of creep in, and that creates skepticism, that creates cynicism, that creates in some people a sense of self-righteousness and an expert mindset because they can't accept that they might be wrong or that
Uh-huh.
might not have compared themselves to the right data, right? Or maybe they're stuck in this measurement of perfectionism. And without a coach to help us really dig deep into some of those impacts that we're feeling, but we're not able to describe, we're not able to identify. It really is difficult for any leader in a situation where they are stressed to recognize that. And I'll tell you something, I use, as you know, and you use this as well, emotional assessment tools in our work. And I've been doing a lot of these emotional intelligence assessments with leaders across the nation in public safety. And I would say on average, 90% of these people, a pretty good number too, don't even know they're stressed. They're living in such a constant state of this more, right?
Mm.
That they don't even know that they're stressed. But yet, when I share their reports with them and I show them their stress numbers, the first thing I say to them is, you need to be really mindful about your physiology, about ignoring pain, about ignoring the default mode
Yeah,
network.
right.
I had one individual, very, very compelling, just 2 weeks ago. I was describing this to him in his report, and this is a senior person who was a commander of a SWAT team who recently moved to a new position because of health issues. And his eyes welled up with tears and he looked at me. He didn't cry, but you could see somebody's eyes,
Mhm. Right.
welling up. And he said, I can't believe you just told me this. I said, no, 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 I'm not telling you anything. You told me this in your answers.
Yeah.
And what you're doing by sharing these insights with an external person, right? A person outside of your brain,
Yeah.
is you're allowing me to share with you information that's creating emotional fitness for you. You're allowing me the psychological richness of your answers to provide for you a way for you to sustain your adaptability, to have some conscious exploration, to have intentional change.
Yeah.
You decide through your own map, your own journey, how you want to
Yeah.
make those, if you will, plasticity changes in who you are. And you have plenty of runway. I don't care how old you are. We all have runway. So, I learned a long time ago, Relly, and our friend Marshall Goldsmith was the person who taught me, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. There's a syndrome many of us go through, especially leaders who are afraid of giving away that expert mindset, of not being the smartest person in the room. And that syndrome costs us so much, right? I don't have to be the smartest person in the room. And in fact, I give myself grace not to be.
Hmm.
It's so enriching for other people to also be able to have the answers. And then sometimes power mutes our empathy. And we see this in emotional intelligence assessments as well. Research supports this. And we see that when we're not empathetic towards ourselves, we
Mm.
also be empathetic towards others. And we know that as leaders get into positions with more authority, with more accountability, with less mindfulness, with less time for thinking, right? That's that 13% who are barely achieving their strategy because they don't have the time. But that power mutes our empathy for ourselves and others. And that singular gyrus in our our brain gets locked
Yeah.
and it hardens. And so that capability to have compassion, self-compassion, is blocked. And then another one is a lack of skills. We stop developing. And when we stop developing ourselves, we're not going to facilitate development in others. And we don't even see it because we lost it and we don't miss it.
Well, all those are these challenges that folks have. We're on autopilot, we're not self-aware, we're on overwhelm, and we don't like to think. If you think about it, here's someone, the profile of a leader and how, we can help. And Kat, it's almost like the idea of this neuroplasticity. We're trying to give them a new autopilot. I mean, so we're trying to, break the old autopilot and put in some new tools, and it doesn't have to be a lot, so that can help them be excellent, not just average. And some
Well,
doesn't take much.
yeah, and I just want to make sure before we dip into some of these ROI numbers, right? And findings. What are some of the key things that we depend on the role of a leader to do? Let me just refresh our memory here for our audience, right? I don't want to make any assumptions here that they know, right?
Right.
So, vision and strategy, communication and representation of the brand, risk management, growth and innovation, collaboration. They have to collaborate with the board, they have to collaborate with business partners, with communities, performance and accountability, and the measures that they're being assessed by, and then financial oversight. And with that financial oversight, leadership and decision making. And all of this sets the culture, it sets the climate, it sets the values and the profitability. And really, I think you have some amazing data here that you've done some fabulous research with on the importance of emotional intelligence. And I just want to say this before we get into the data. I'm getting a lot of positive feedback in these programs on emotional fitness that we do as part of the MAP program and the 11 rings of Magnus Ovea, which is the 11 rings of peak performance. And the ring that I'm responsible for is emotional factors.
Mm.
And we know that emotional factors, that emotional intelligence, that adaptability is greater than 78% responsible for leadership success. So something to pay
Say,
attention to
say that
here.
one again.
It's so emotional intelligence is responsible for greater than 78% of a leader's success in a leadership role.
Yeah, right. And that's why you and I early on, really met around emotional intelligence, positive psychology. We both got certified in the emotional quotient inventory at the same time and have been using that. And, just in general, when we think about coaching, we won't spend a lot of time on this because it's pretty obvious from what we're saying, because we want to make sure we give people a few of the tools that we like.
Mhm.
But some of the return on investment. So you're in an organization, should we really get coaching? Should we really do that? Well, the ICF International Coaching Federation said there's about a 700% return. That's the median. But this is kind of new information that I saw, Kat. 19% of the folks saw a 50 times return on investment, and 28% saw between 10 to 49. So not only seven, but some saw 28% or 10 to 49. Those numbers are easier, or 50 times their investment. That
Well,
is incredible.
it is incredible. And let's just break this down. Let's just break it down and make it really simple. Okay. So in 2008, you and I had a program that we called the Excel Institute. And we talked about the fact that if you took one individual in your organization who had a leadership role, and that individual cost you, let's say, $700,000 a year, basic income, benefits, right? Vacation days, anything you can associate with the value proposition of that individual. And now that individual walks off the job. They're stressed, they're overwhelmed. They're unfortunately making decisions that might be now unethical or in the gray space. For whatever reason, they either walk off or you fire them. Take that number, multiply it by 7. That's the loss
Wow.
that you just took. Think of that number.
Yeah. Yeah.
7 times 700,000. And we used that number back in 2008 to show what it cost a company when somebody walked out of their front
Yeah.
door. Now, let's look at it in terms of the taxpayer, because not everybody's going to hire a leader at $700,000. But let's be practical. You're just a person in the community, but your tax dollars goes to hiring police and public safety, EMTs and firefighters. Guess what? It costs on average between $300,000 and $350,000 to make a police officer. That's from the poly, the panel, and the psych evaluation for them to come into the organization and be assessed. Now they go through the police academy for 6 months. Now they come out and everybody loves these TV shows, right? The Rookie and all CSI and, and CIS. And we love our TV shows. But now this person has to go in field training. Well, then you're not only taking that person and putting them on the street, but you're taking the field trainer off the street to help coach them. And now you have to give them a salary and benefits and vacation time. $300,000 to $350,000 to make a police officer. And Now they get to the end of that training period and they're on your payroll. And now they won't even get out of their patrol car because they're afraid,
Hmm.
because their lives are at risk every time they go to answer a call,
Yeah.
because they're no longer seen as the good guy and gal.
Right.
They're now seen as the enemy. So we're hurting ourselves in our communities by not understanding these metrics. And it's so important because it doesn't matter what it costs us. We lose either way.
Yeah. So true, so true. Well, we're gonna take a quick break and then we're gonna come back and I'm gonna highlight a tool for folks. So one of the things that leaders can do, and then any tools that you want to better share within our time frame. So you're listening to Leadership Development News. Continue to tune in and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Leadership Development News. We've had an enjoyable conversation today. You know, Relly and I haven't done a show of our own in a long time. And today we talked about coaching strategies for turbulent times, kind of a play on words, given that Matthew and I have a podcast called Strategy for Turbulent Times. And Relly, we so love, having this time, just you and I
Yeah,
together.
I
That's
agree.
me, myself, and I having a good time with you, one of our favorite people. There's so many wearables now out there, and I'm part of a brand new app called Magnus One. And I have my own channel at the National Command and Staff College. You can find out all about what we're up to with the 11 Rings of Magnus Ovea. And we'll be launching that channel very soon, so stay tuned. These wearables have become so popular. We know Calm and certainly Six by our friend Paul Zach. Tell us a little bit about some of the tools that have been tried and
Yeah,
true over the years that really make a difference on these micro initiatives that can have a macro impact.
thank you. Well, this is a tool that I often share with the College of Executive Coaching. You and I both do courses there, and it was the ninth school certified to train people. Now there's, I think, about 600 schools worldwide, and you and I
Yeah,
have been the OG, as you call it,
yeah, including
for a
including
while.
my new school. My new
Right?
school. Yeah,
You're
the Magnus Coach
exactly.
certification for first responders. Yeah.
Say the name again.
Oh, it's the Magnus Coach certification for first responders.
And so, also aside from the College of Executive Coaching, our friends uh, Dr. Ella Schwab and Dr. Gusab, we have Vital Signs for Vital Skills, where we
Right.
certify physicians or healthcare workers to be coaches. So
That's
we've been
right.
in the field for quite a while. So what's the vivid tool? If I said to you, Kat, you're my leader, I come to you and I say, hey, Kat, you got a minute? And you're a leader. Where does your mind go? It probably goes to, okay, you want help from me? You want my direction? And it feels good to give direction. And it feels like that's your job, is to give direction. And so that is what we would call the manager misstep, when you immediately go to giving direction. And so I'm going to share this Vivid tool, VIVID. Yes, direction is one of the things that someone wants, but often I would say to people in the coaching school, I'd say, someone comes to you and you think they want direction. Why wouldn't you? It feels good. You release dopamine. And for many leaders, probably early in the day, you're solving problems and you're like, ah, great. Who's got something for me? All right, what about this? What about this? That's where you lose your cognitive budget if you think you're solving everything. So, what percent of time, I would say, does someone not want your direction, but instead they got their own idea? They thought about the problem more. They want to delve into it more. They don't want your direction. They want their own idea. They want validation for their idea. Well, they haven't said it that way. So therefore, the manager misstep goes right to direction. And so when I asked people, I said, what percent of time do you think the person wants validation for their idea, not your idea if you're a leader? Every time, 70, 80, 90% of the time, people say they want validation for their idea. They thought about it more, but they miscommunicated what they wanted to their leader. So this idea of vivid and as a leader, you can use this with your team. What would someone want from you? And I would say from the leader, it's like, help me, help you. So the first V is vent. Do you need to vent? People vent all the time, and we think they're complaining. You go, oh, you can't figure it out. If you are the person going to your boss and you say, yeah, I just need to vent, it allows the boss to listen better. So that's the first V, vent. The I is information. Probably doesn't happen that often, but where's this? When's this? But the second V is validation. So what does that sound like if you're going to your leader? Hey, I got an idea. I'd like to just run it by you. Can you listen? Would the leader listen differently? Would they get off autopilot of giving direction? Yes. And then the second I is maybe it's not something they validate, it's they ideate. Hey, you know this new project? Can we talk a little bit about this? Let's brainstorm a little bit. I'm not validating something. Or they go to D, hey, can we do this? All five are important, but we don't have that language. And a couple of examples I'll give you. I had a manager that I was dealing with, kind of a rough, gruff guy. He loved the vivid. On his computer, he had there. Someone would come in, and he's like, all right. What do you want from me? And they'd be a little freaked out. They go, validation, vent, and it calmed him. It got him off autopilot. So that's one example. But the other example, I think, happens all the time if you're a leader. This was an aerospace company I was working with, and every airline was in there. They made plane seats, and the general manager was there in his office. His assistant was out there. There'd be a line out his door that they wanted his time. And what happens? They come in, they start talking for 5 or 10 minutes. He still doesn't know where we're going with this. And then he's looking at the line out there, and his assistant said, he's doing executive coaching now. He's trying this new tool. When you go in there, he's been using the vivid, vent, information, validation, ideation, direction. If you could say that in the first minute or two, he will better listen to you. So that's the vivid. I think it's a paradigm shift for leaders because for all the right reasons, but the wrong outcomes, they go right to direction and they disempower people versus empower them.
And as you said something there, it triggered in me the difference between being vivid or the villain, right? Is usually the villain, is the wicked person with the wicked intentions who acts as an antagonist to the hero or the protagonist. And by using vivid, we avoid being the villain.
Yeah.
So, it's a double there for the manager misstep or the
Yeah.
autopilot. You're not only able to ideate and validate and have
Yeah.
people feel included and important, and provide you with information that makes you aware of what's going on, but it also creates engagement in that relationship that you want to keep
Exactly.
with your people,
And
right? And it's allowing your direct reports to teach you. And in the same opportunity, you're now making sure that that little villain that likes to be the power monger is
yeah,
kept in check.
yeah, it can let the leader bite their tongue and not feed their ego by going two directions. So it's kind of like you're saying. I'll give you
Yeah.
one other example around the venting. And so we know we use Myers-Briggs and extrovert, introvert. I had a woman who reported she was an extrovert and reported to a manager, engineering background, male, who was an introvert. And so she would come in trying to let him know about what's going on and information. If people ask, she was venting. It's kind of here's what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And he, in his mind, and this could be sometimes a gender issue, male, female, he's kind of thinking, okay, what's the problem here? What's this, what do I need to solve? And she's venting. And what does he do? He gives her the hand.
Ah,
And that was such a violation. And so in coaching both of them, once he realized she's trying to help you, she's venting. And if we all have people who vent in our world, but if once you name it to tame it, yeah, I need to vent. And then all of a sudden they're going on for 5 minutes, 6 minutes. You could always say, do you still need more time to vent? And it may slow them down and put some boundaries around it. And so she needed to say to him first, her side, I just need a vent. I'll work it out. I need a vent. Two sentences lets him sit back and not think he's got to solve anything. And then for him, it allowed her to honor her own process and him not being the jerk putting the hand out.
yeah. And, it's such a simple thing, but we had one of our students, a very empathetic and compassionate person. She took the feeling wheel. And for those of you who know the feeling wheel, many of us forget that there's a whole language around feelings that we don't spend any time with. So we go right to exaggerated emotions. So a venting could be, I'm a little angst, I'm a little aggravated, I'm a little frustrated, as
Right.
opposed to I'm depressed or I'm anxious, right? So what she did, to the point you're making about I just want to vent, she had the wheel on her door to her
Oh,
office. And as people came in, she would say, so tell me where you are on the wheel.
that's
And
fun.
that would give her an idea, a little bit of an emotional audit, if you
Yeah.
will, what they were coming in with that she could either prepare for or get them to shift to or from. And it's such a simple thing, right? It's such an easy
Yeah.
moment of mastery for all of us to just pause. And one of the most beautiful things I've learned in working with public safety and military professionals across all arms of the military is carry a bottle of water with you and offer it to people, not a used one, a fresh one.
Uh,
And by just offering a bottle of water and doing a kindness,
uh-huh.
taking the
Uh-huh.
cap,
Yeah.
twisting it, putting it, handing it to somebody,
Yeah.
you gain so many emotional, empathetic points.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if they're going to vent. It doesn't matter if you're going to hear something that somebody wants to teach you. It doesn't matter whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. It's that engagement and that
Yep.
openness of fostering feelings of being personally invested in someone that's going to make that conversation be
That,
whatever it needs to be with no
right.
judgment, right?
Yeah. And I think that as we're winding this down to kind of frame what you just said, and you and I both have said this for any leader, you need to connect before you direct. And so whether you're finding out what they're feeling, how things were, we all have something in common with our people, sports, our pets, our spouses, our kids. Connect before you direct.
Absolutely. Well, let's say goodbye to the Jafar from Aladdin, the Ursula from Little Mermaid, and the Joker from Batman. And, well, even though Mr. Gru can be a good guy, let's say goodbye to the bad Mr. Gru. And for all of you out there who have those hidden leaders inside of you, remember, we're always here for you. We love you. Tune in to tune up your performance with leadership development news every week. And until next time, we absolutely are here to share our moments of mastery with you. And don't forget to share yours.